not following along, I had just created a quick playlist, and in this playlist we're doing some tutorials related to your first pipeline. And in this video we're going to go ahead and set up a EC2 instance in AWS and set up a Docker file and build a Docker image from that Docker file, so we could go ahead in the next video and the videos that follow thereafter. We're going to go ahead and use a pipeline to go ahead and update that. We're going to go ahead and use a pipeline to go ahead and update that we're going to go ahead and use a pipeline to go ahead and update that Docker image and push it to, for example, a production server. In this case, it's just a dev server we're playing around with, just to kind of give you guys some ideas and concept to play around with in your lab. So with that being said, let's start today's video. All right, so for the very first step, you're going to go ahead and over at the top, or even on the recently visited, just go ahead and type in EC2. Open up that EC2 service. In there, we're going to go ahead and create launch, or we're going to go ahead and click on launch instance. This is for you to go ahead and start a new EC2 instance. We're just going to name this simple pipeline EC2. Then we're going to scroll down and we're going to click on our image. We're going to select Ubuntu in this lab. We're going to leave this default. We're going to use a T2 micro. We could even go even lower to T2 nano. Scroll on down to the key pair, and we're just going to do create a new key pair. We're going to name this. In this case, we'll just copy this name here, and we'll just go ahead and name this here. Leave it RSA, leave it a .pem extension, hit create key pair. Once you click on that, it'll go ahead and it will download it for you, as you can see here. All right, scrolling down to network settings. In here, we're just going to go ahead and leave this default as well. This will allow us to SSH into it from any machine, in my case, my home lab. And we're just going to create a security group, as I don't have another one existing already. But if you did have one, you can go here and you could select that security group with those rules. I have a few actually, but in this case, it's just easier for you guys. Just go ahead, if you don't have one, click allow SSH traffic and leave anywhere for default with this CIDR address here. And then we're going to go ahead and also enable these, because this will enable ports 80 and 443 by default. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit launch instance here at the bottom right. Once that is complete, go ahead up to instances. We should now see the instance running. Go ahead and just click into that. This is going to be tore down once you guys get into it, so I'm not really too concerned about if you see any of these addresses. And then we're just going to go ahead and then we're going to take note of this public IP address here, the IPv4. Just copy that and then open up your PowerShell. All right, once you have your PowerShell open, head over to the directory where you had downloaded that key. In this case, I have the key right here. And then we're just going to take that same IP address, like I mentioned. We're going to go ahead and do SSH. If you had selected Ubuntu, like I said, the default username for this image is Ubuntu. If you selected the Amazon image, the AMI, you will use EC2-user. Go ahead, paste in that IP address, do that -i for the identity file, and then go ahead and specify the key that we want to go ahead and use. Hit yes to accept that fingerprint. And there we go. Now we're in our machine, and we have full access. And that's it. So now we have full access. We're in our machine, so let's go ahead and on to the next step. All right, so at this point we have an EC2 instance in our AWS account. Go ahead and clear this out. We had just SSH into this account or into this EC2 instance. And the next step that we want to go ahead and do is we want to go get Docker installed. The old way is to go ahead and just do sudo apt install docker.io. But per the installation instructions provided by Docker, you're going to go ahead and want to do a few more steps that are newer. That's kind of a deprecated instruction, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. With any new machine, you're going to want to do sudo apt-get update to update your repositories, and then do an upgrade. In this case, we're just going to do an update to pull in the latest information. We're going to install some packages, so make sure you do sudo apt-get install CA certificates and curl. This is going to be necessary in order to continue onward. Next, you're going to do sudo install -m for the mode 0755 and do etc apt keyrings. Then we're going to want to do curl this command here. This is why we installed sudo curl, or we installed curl, and we're just going to curl this, output it to Docker, to this directory here with this extension here, and then we're going to go ahead and run sudo chmod to add these permission sets to that file here. So if we list out, you can see that this file has been created. Next, you want to go ahead and you're going to run this command here, and I'll provide the instructions in the description below. This is all from the Docker website. Essentially what this is doing is going to go ahead and echo this information into our, where is it at? Into this repository list, docker.list, and that'll allow us to pull. That will allow us to pull in the Docker from the official repository. And then again, if we run sudo apt-get update, we are now, as you can see, pulling in the Docker packages here. So now if we were to run, now we're going to go ahead and install a few more packages. If we did not perform those steps previously, we would not be able to install any of these because these packages are not in the default Ubuntu repository. But now if we go ahead and send those, we will be able to download and install. All right, so now at this point, we had just installed the packages. As you can see here, we did sudo apt-get install docker-ce, CLI, and so on and so forth. So if we go ahead and clear that out, all we're going to do now is just to verify that we have Docker. You can just do Docker, and you at least see that you have these the help commands essentially come up. Or you could do docker-version, and that'll give us the build. So we know that we have Docker installed. And at this point, just to end this video, essentially what we want to do is we want to go ahead and, well, we got two more steps. So first, let's just to make sure everything works, we're going to do sudo docker run hello world. And what that does is just pulls in the Docker image from the repository, hello world, with the latest tag, and you can see that it worked correctly. So that means that we were able to communicate with the Docker repository, Docker Hub, and pull in that image and get that ran. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to set up our own file. So what we're going to do is just create a separate directory. So we'll just do make directory, and then we'll just name this sample web server. We'll do simple because that's what we named. Let's go ahead and cd into that directory or change directory. And then let's go ahead and do Docker file. So we want to create a Docker file. We're going to use Vim. And in this case, we're just going to go ahead and paste this in here so I don't have to type it out for you guys. And how I got this was just from ChatGPT. It's just a simple Docker file. I asked ChatGPT to generate me a simple Docker file to spin up a node.js web server, essentially. And I asked for the appropriate files that are necessary for that. And it gave me first the Docker file. And what this is going to do is it's going to build the base image, or it's going to build our Docker image from this base image here. And then it's going to obviously, as you can read the notes, it's going to set the working directory. It's going to copy that package, which we're going to create in a second. And then it's going to go ahead and run npm install. It's going to copy that code over, and then it's going to expose this port, allowing us to get access to that web server. So let's go ahead and write quit. And then the next thing that we want to do is we're going to do a simple, I'm not a front-end developer or anything like that. Again, so I use ChatGPT. This is just to get the point across. And then we're going to do, sorry, I didn't show you guys. We do create a file, server.js. And then in this file, again, we're just going to copy and paste this. And this is just going to be a simple web server running on port 3000, as that is what we have exposed. The host name listing on all network interfaces. This is just for this configuration in the lab. Yeah, and then we're just going to pretty much print a screen hello Docker. And also if we were to check the log, the console log, we will see the server's running at the host name and port. So go ahead and we're going to save that. And then last but not least is we want to create a package.json. And this is all necessary for the node.js website, web server. Obviously this would vary depending on what server you are running. But this is just the necessary information from ChatGPT that I was able to gather, and it worked perfect. And then going forward, we're going to iterate on this Docker image to update it as if we were making like a production change and we want to update the website. That's the whole point of this whole tutorial. So that's that. So now that we have that information, all this will also be in a GitHub repository, and you could go ahead and copy that over as well, so you don't have to worry about doing that front end and developing them and stuff. We're just trying to get the Docker and stuff pushed over so we could start building our pipeline in the following videos. All right, so now if we list out the contents of this directory, we're going to see that we have a Docker file, the package.json, and the server.js for JavaScript. And you can see that we have the server.js. So all we got to do at this point is just do sudo docker build -t and then name it web server and then specify with a period. And it's going to go ahead and build that Docker image from the Docker file that we had just created. As you can see, it did all these commands that we had just talked about. So now if we list out Docker image ls, you're going to see that we just created our sample web server, which is what I just named right here, which is funny because I did simple here and sample here, but it'll be all right for this example. And so at this point now we have our sample web server. So if we did sudo docker ps, obviously we have nothing running at this point. So the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and run docker run. Now this is going to vary, but in my case, I'm just going to run it on port 80, and that's the external, and then internal is port 3000 sample web server. And so what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to talk to the Docker container on port 3000, and we're able to get to that through port 80, or to get to the web server. So go ahead and click run. All right, so for whatever reason, when I had copied and pasted, it did not work out correctly. So like I said, this information will be in a GitHub repository in the description below, so you could copy the right file over. So if we read out Docker file, this would be the correct file. I had not copied this over. And then same thing for the other files. I missed the bottom portion of it. Or this one had like some periods at the end from my notes when I had done this previously. So like I said, go to the description below, grab that GitHub repository, and then you have the files in there. We're not front-end developers, we're just here labbing it up. So with that being said, once you do that, go ahead, go back to Docker, the Docker run command. Like I said, sudo docker run, specify the port on port 80. This is how we will reach it externally. This is internally for the Docker. And then we're going to use the sample web server image. Go ahead, execute that. We're going to see that the server is now running. This is from the console log that I just changed. Again, this is a typo. There wasn't supposed to be an F there. But anyway, so now if we go ahead and head over to our web browser and we open up the public IPv4 address, and then we just go ahead and do port 80, remove the HTTPS, and you can see that we now have our hello Docker running. And that's really it. That's going to close out today's video. So what we had done today is we had created an EC2 instance within AWS, just essentially a server within the cloud. And on this server, we went ahead and we installed the Docker, and then we created a Docker image from a Docker file, a custom Docker file, which we grabbed from ChatGPT. I did that off video, but you could easily go to ChatGPT, ask it to draft you up a sample Docker file for a node.js web server, and it will provide you with the package.json, the server.js, and the Docker file that you need, just as we went over today. That will be in the description below. But going forward in the next video or the video thereafter, we're going to go ahead and start getting into the pipeline, which was the whole point of this lab and this tutorial. So what that's going to do is when we go into our GitLab, and let's say our developers, or if you are a developer and you host this file in your GitLab and you make any changes to, let's say you make any changes to your server.js, maybe you want it to say, maybe you want to change this hello Docker and you want it to say hello world, right? But in the production world, in an environment where this is a real website going live, it's not something that you're going to want to do manually. You're not going to want to go ahead on the production server and update your files and then change those files on the fly. What usually is going to happen is you're going to have some sort of automation in place, and there's going to be tests and stuff like that, which is everything that we're going to cover. And that pipeline is what is going to happen. So if you go into, or your developers go into a file, they make a change, the pipeline is going to execute, and depending on what you have in that pipeline, you might have some linting, some testing, some unit tests, just static analyzer tests, dynamic, whatever the case may be, before it even gets pushed to public. Maybe it even gets pushed to a staging environment, and then there's some manual checks, or just make sure certain services are running, whatever the case may be. That's all going to happen or take place in the next couple of videos. It's not going to be as complex, as this is just a beginner playlist that I'm kind of playing around with for you guys. But going forward, we're going to get more in depth and more detailed in different playlists. But definitely be sure to check it out. I hope you were able to take something away from today's video. If you have not seen the two videos prior to this, that kind of got us to this point, so definitely go check that out. And as always, never stop learning.